right, well, good morning and welcome to today's Excavation Safety Alliance Town Hall. My name is Whitney Price and I'm looking forward to today's discussion on responsible fiber deployment, strategies for protection and damage prevention. I'd like to thank our ESA member companies for helping make these town halls possible. It's your support that makes our mission of saving lives through education and collaboration a reality. ESA town halls are an open forum to discuss concerns and present potential solutions to improve damage prevention and excavation safety. This town hall is meant to be a discussion, and you're encouraged to ask questions and share solutions. If you do have a question, please type it into the chat or click the raise hand icon. Give us a few seconds, and we will give you permission to unmute yourself. To unmute, simply click on the microphone icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen. And please try to keep your comments brief to allow others time to interact. A recording of this town hall will be posted on ESA's YouTube channel. At the conclusion of the town hall, each of our panelists will highlight a moving forward step to ensure we stay focused on practical and impactful solutions. We will conclude today at 11:30 a.m. Central. I'm pleased to have such a great panel with a wealth of knowledge and experience. So to get us started, I'd like our panel members and our moderator to give a brief background on themselves. Lewis, why don't you get us started?
Good morning. Great. So yes, from a self-introduction standpoint, I am Lewis Panzer. I am the Executive Director of North Carolina 811. I've been here for 13 years in this role. Been around for the industry probably 25 years. Worked plenty of research papers. Have been very much enjoying the opportunities to do this town hall as well as some of the other ones that we've done previously, and working with the Excavation Safety Alliance for many, many years in helping to educate folks and, again, like you said, foster a good communication. Chris?
Hey, everyone. I'm Chris Russ. I'm the Director of Government Affairs over at USIC. I've been in the locating industry for over 30 years. 28 of those were in operations, everything from locator up to Director of Operations. Currently, I also sit on the NC 811 Board of Directors, the Executive Committee as past president, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Thanks, Chris. Kelly?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. Looking forward to the discussion. As brief background on me, I have background in consulting and have worked with telcos and cable companies, 30 plus years all in, and I'm currently with G Fiber, otherwise known as Google Fiber. And I'm sure as many of you do, wear multiple hats. And one of those is to work with our partners in the industry to ensure that the Call Before You Dig program is running smoothly, that we're keeping public safety kind of as our top priority, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, as the role of moderator, it puts me into the spot of kind of directing traffic. So folks, bear with us. Well, this is obviously, as was mentioned before, meant to be a discussion. So it's not a series of PowerPoint slides where we're going to come tell you a bunch of stuff. We're going to have a dialogue. As you have thoughts about this, please do use the chat to put those in there. As a quick overview as to why we're here as the three of us, last year we came together, myself, Chris, and Ariane Schaefer from G Fiber, Google Fiber, to talk about what the impacts were going to be of this infrastructure bill, and specifically the rural fiber deployment through a variety of grants, and what that looked like in terms of the impacts to one call and the one call process. Those of you who are on this meeting, I know are familiar in some way or another with the one call process. You're an intimate actor with it in some way. And so this process is already today, being strained in some capacities just by the sheer volume and by a series of different things. And states are taking different stances to try to address that, whether it's in policy, whether it's working on their legislation, etc. But this is super important to every stakeholder that's involved in the 811 process. Why? Because if you're in the one call center, you're trying to figure out how to address volume increases. with staffing or technology. If you're in the locate industry, you're trying to get a handle on that sheer volume, the wave of tickets that are coming and trying to figure that out. If you're a contractor who's doing this work, you've got incentives on your back to try to get this work done as quickly as you can. So you're likely going to try to figure out how you can do that effectively. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about today. So I do appreciate everybody's self-introductions. We do have some good experience here. And I'm just going to get off with a question for the two of you guys. Based on your experience, what do you think that your companies individually have learned from previous fiber deployments? And, and again, what made them successful or challenging? And what makes this new deployment different in your opinion? Kelly?
Yeah, I can start with that one. The model a lot of companies have worked around and within has been kind of this mentality of, first to market wins. That seems to be what drives a lot of these broadband builds. Is this, I've got to be here first if I'm going to win. And what we've learned over the past 5 or 6 years is that may be somewhat true in the beginning, but in reality, it's the face you put forward, the service you provide, how you interact with communities that really wins in the day, in the long run. So yes, we like to go fast, we like to be first, but we also recognize with the amount of work that's coming, the volume that's coming, we're all excited about serving underserved areas, closing the digital divide, all the positive that's coming out of this infrastructure investment, that that value will be bottlenecked. It's going to be held up if we all don't step back and say, I can't just be in it for me to win. In order for this to get done, to close the digital divide, to bring service to a larger population, that this is a huge undertaking. Lots of moving pieces. Everybody has their objectives. Sometimes they're complementary, sometimes they conflict, but in any case, this whole communication coordination piece, I think, is what's different now, as opposed to just trying to be in it for yourself and win the day, which is still important. We want to shift that mindset to, we want to get this done well, we want to get it done safely and bring value.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, but before you jump on that, I'll say that that's absolutely, one of the things you hit on is strong in my mind is the communities that you're trying to serve with this fiber when you bring it in there. I mean, it's your name and your reputation, even before that is lit up and you're trying to sign up customers. So that interaction with those communities starts way in advance earlier on. Chris, what are your thoughts about what has your company particularly learned from some of these in the past, and how do you feel about this moving forward?
So I think I'm gonna start out with some of the challenges we've experienced with some of the overbuilds that's happened in the last 10 years or so. And one of the biggest challenges for any locator or operator is or utility company is that sometimes we don't learn about the projects until the tickets are called in. And there was no pre-communication, no coordination, and particularly now with some of the things going on with the rural development of broadband, is that there's multiple providers, so multiple contractors, multiple companies. So having those one of the successes, I'll kind of counteract, I'll kind of answer my challenges with successes is the pre-con meetings. Have a meeting, discuss the project, discuss your timeline, discuss where you're going to go, and let's get faces and names so that we can provide a safe work environment for the people doing the work as well as the people living in those communities. Another challenge we've had in the past is, it continues to happen now, is we'll get more tickets than called in at one time that can reasonably be completed in the life of that ticket. If you're going to call in an entire project and update it for 2 or 3 months, that creates issues for the locators and the operators who's out there having to mark those facilities, because which one do we do first? And you know, most state laws require that those tickets get completed in 48 or 72 hours. And if you've got work that's not even going to be performed yet, you know, those are tickets that are taken away from the excavators who are on site ready to dig. Um, you know, there's some states that still don't have limitations or scope on the size of the tickets. And when you call in more than you're going to be able to get done during the life of that ticket, now you're creating an opportunity to update not just a smaller section, but the entire ticket. And you know, on the update, if we got to go back and mark something that you've already completed, that puts, you know, again, takes resources away from the work just being performed. Another thing that we learned is, you know, sometimes we get contracts or tickets where they'll call in both sides of the road so they can try and determine where they want to put their facilities. Um, you know, if you do a pre-con meeting and meet with the locators, you can kind of get an idea. Hey, this side of the road has got a lot less conflict than the other side of the road. And then once you have a plan, then white line it so that we're not marking more than has to be marked so that the technicians can be, you know, routed to the appropriate tickets. And then, you know, I guess the big thing is communication. I mean, we talk about it in everything with damage prevention. You know, if you have, um, you know, some utility companies that they'll pay for managed services. Others will have weekly or daily, some cases, meet sheets. This is where we are today. This is where we're going to be tomorrow, so that we can get those facilities marked, and we're not marking stuff that no one's going to be digging on yet. And also, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I think it's really important for the ISP to be involved in the project. Sometimes they contract that work out for installation, and then they kind of wash their hands of it. And you know, if they've got multiple contractors, you know, who's going where, and now we create, which it all creates a delay in the process. I think with what's coming down the road now, I think it's going to be extremely important for communication to happen, particularly when you're working on grants. You know, there's going to be deadlines and penalties involved. So, you know, we can all point fingers, but we all kind of have to work together as partners in damage prevention to try and make this work successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it hasn't been said out loud, but the truth is, it's all this work that's coming down the road to install. The main efforts that we're all here for is to also protect what's there. You know, there's a tremendous amount that's already there. That's why we're in this industry to begin with. That's why we do locates. That's why we have a one call process. And if you're taking out infrastructure while you're trying to add value by bringing it to those rural areas, kind of defeats the purpose in a lot of ways. You know, there's a couple of notes that came in from the chat. This idea of fiber companies, or really any company, taking responsibility for their contractors and you know, and covering liabilities. I do think that it does stem from the top down, as was mentioned. I think that the companies themselves have to set a culture. And they need to socialize that with their contractors and codify it in contracts so that it's understood that doing those things that we're talking about, pre-con meetings, white lining, participation in the local events like the utility coordinating committees, you know, those types of things are super valuable, but they have to feel that that's part of this process from the top down. So that, I think those are all, and somebody else said you can never over communicate, and that's absolutely true. And it doesn't start and end with the 811 process. That's the other thing I would say. So one of the things I was going to tail into this is, you know, as a one call center, how we can leverage resources that we have to get ahead of these large project deployments. One of the things that we're trying to do right now in this initiative, in working with G Fiber and with USIC, and specifically with Chris, to talk to these folks, is to make them understand that we have an incredible network of communication available to us for 700 members in our state, that we can let them know. We can be Paul Revere and say the fiber is coming, but we have to know where it is, where it's going to be deployed, and when. It was mentioned earlier, you know, knowing that track of the plan. Where are these resources going to be deployed? How many people are going to be involved in this? What's the speed at which you're going to go? Those kind of things, if we can communicate that in advance, especially to small municipalities and areas that are not equipped to take a disruption like this, they need as much lead time and heads up as possible. Consequently, we have put together a flyer. We are working directly with the state broadband folks that are going to be passing these grants down and awarding them, to make them understand that not only white lining and pre-con meetings, but we have training specific to what the law in North Carolina is. It's unique from other states. So anyone coming in to break ground in this state, they should be familiar with it. And it feels like it should be a pre-requirement to even get in there, is to take that hour-and-a-half free training so that you're familiarized with that. And alongside that, then some of the other pieces. And it was mentioned before, and that we understand that there's deadlines. These projects, they're not open-ended, so people don't have all day to sit around and do this. So this question goes to you guys after I give a quick response to it. But what would you say to those that believe that following these kinds of practices, best practices, thorough communication, transparency, what do you say to those people who say, yeah, but that gets in the way of my timely delivery of these services?
Lewis, and I can step in and respond to that one. That's the mindset shift that I was talking about earlier, that too much of what drives these projects today are simply, the cost and schedule components. And as we've talked about, the communication and coordination piece isn't where it needs to be. Even if this was a normal build environment, which it's not. We're talking about the ramp and broadband builds, but the infrastructure build also funds, other civil projects. So this isn't the only challenge that our partners in the 811 centers and our locators and those folks are facing. We're just one piece of that puzzle. So really what we need to do, and I have a partner who would have been here presenting today, but she wasn't available on our government affairs team, doing really good work to kind of work with states, see what kind of bills are coming, new ideas being introduced, changes the existing policies, and really the key there, and we haven't got much time, is to shift from that fast so we can win to how do we recognize our stakeholder partners, what are their needs, particularly from a timing perspective. So we're both an operator and a builder. Within our organization, we don't expect any of our teams to be able to ramp overnight. If we have a project internal, we work with our internal partners to say, this is what's coming, this is the scale of the work, here's the schedule, here's what we need from you. Those same conversations have to happen with all our external partners too, starting with, the 811 centers and the municipalities, and just, be having those conversations, understand the work that we're doing and the impact it's going to have on that end-to-end process from, hey, we want to build this city out, to we've just connected our first customer. And that's a big lift. To your point, Lewis, that takes a lot of effort. It takes dedication, from everybody on the project, but most importantly, it takes leadership buy-in. And that's one of the big things that we're promoting is, we have to make this a key for success all the way up to the C-suites. It was interesting, I started working with this team probably about a year ago, and there's a lot of work put into this Infrastructure Act, a lot of planning, but when we started to talk about locates, either people didn't even know the process existed, or they didn't know what it was, let alone, are we putting undue strain on this process? And we absolutely are. So this is a little bit of a catch-up game. We've got to move fairly quickly to try to minimize the impact that all these projects are going to have. But that's the idea. So from the senior leadership down, shifting that mentality from fast and cheap to, we've got to work with everybody so that everyone wins, and not just we win the day and heck with the rest of you.
But from a top-down perspective, I think when we talk about things like ROI and and money talks, obviously, and that is a critical thing. In my mind, part of this is all about making people realize that you can be successful, you can still deliver on time, and you can do that while following all these procedures through transparency, through lifting your kimono, showing them where you're going to go, sharing of information that you have available to you to help smooth that process. It doesn't necessarily have to impede that return on investment. In fact, it'll enhance it. And we've been trying to tell those positive stories that we've seen literally. So that's kind of where I was thinking about this, is that it doesn't mean that you have to go fast to win the day. Actually, you're going to more likely smooth your way through with everybody who's your potential customers, as well as the communities you're serving and everyone else that's connected to it, by working directly with them. And Chris, I want to give you a chance to speak to that too. I mean, what you've had some direct line of fire with seeing these practice, seeing how working like this is successful.
Well, and I think so. Best practices are there for a reason. First and foremost is safety. I mean, if you're taking a shortcut, you think the best practices are getting in the way. It kind of goes back to that Priceless commercial. What happens when someone's injured or hurt, or God forbid, even fatally injured? You know, that now it's like, well, if I'd follow those practices, which seem cumbersome and time consuming, now you just saved a life. You know, um, then a lot of, particularly in new construction, new overbuilds, these ISPs are now going to be a part of the community and where they're building. So the reputation starts from the time that contractor starts placing their facilities. That they're not going to look at the contractor, the ABC, contracting company. They're going to look at whose facility did they put in the ground. And then, I think, there's another component of it that we hear all the time. If you can get this job done without having downtime because you damaged a facility, that makes the process smoother. It speeds you up. I saw someone make a comment, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. It really is. So I think it's important, and that's for all of the partnerships. That's the utility owner, the locators, the municipalities, the contractors, all of it. I think, they put best practices in there for a reason. Is because they are the best practices to help you be successful in your deployment.
And a couple of questions that popped in there, and as we talk about safety and and the impact on the public, that's what comes to mind too. Any gas strike, even a small one in front of a school that requires fire trucks to roll and kids to be evacuated from an area, that's news making stuff. Forget the real serious things, but even those kinds of disruptions make a huge impact on people. One of the questions that popped up: are there any specific best practices that you're currently using that you can share in North Carolina with the rest of us to manage the increase of work content associated with each ticket? So, we do have a ticket size and scope, limitation, which we're really trying to even define further through new work that we're doing on the law that will be introduced in a new bill next year. But having a scope and a ticket that's reasonable, having positive response, which is a best practice, having electronic positive response, requiring that both parties both provide it and check it is a piece of that. We also have a short notice ticket that says, if you're out there waiting and you did not get a response, you can request this short notice ticket. What we've seen in some cases with that is it comes with its own challenges, depending on how they got to that point where they had to make the request and what all the parties in between knew about the situation prior to even receiving it. Chris, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I add a little bit to that. I don't know, we are working in North Carolina to address some of these things in the law, but I think a really good practice, and we have some partners that have done this. It's kind of staggering your tickets to some degree. Don't call in everything you're going to do this week on Monday. let's stagger it. Let's get 3 days worth of work marked out, then call in the other tickets. We've had success with some of our partners in that. Then there's others that, that they don't have the resources to manage that. And I think that's a real deficiency in part of the process is lack of project management, whether that's on the utility owner or the contractor. But, it is, the again, we're going back to the same thing is communication. But to the question that was asked, I think there are some real huge opportunities in a lot of the state laws to try and help manage those, whether they're complex tickets, project tickets, whether it's, maximum amount of work that are going to be called in at one time, whether it's limiting updates. It's all of those things and components. Some states are very active and doing a good job in it. And hopefully with all of us as a team and community working together, we can address those in other states as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important, smoothing out the flow, as you mentioned, and I think that's the communication that's probably the most in need of making sure it's shored up is the connection between the actual boots on the ground and the equipment is hitting it and the people that are generating the tickets, whether that's from the very beginning of the initiation of it through the end of it, the components of it, the pieces of it. And if there's a disconnect there, then the last line of defense are the locators and the people who are working directly with those folks every morning as they're getting ready to turn on the equipment, say, where are you actually going today? But if you're going to utilize the 811 process, it would sure be helpful to break it down as we're talking about. One of the things that becomes a challenge, and it was even mentioned something in the chat about the HDD and the speed at which some of this stuff can be deployed. I wonder sometimes whether the technology for deployment is exceeding the ability to stay with it in terms or ahead of it in locating, especially in relation to really populated areas. But even these rural areas where they can pretty much gun it and go, it's very difficult in my imagination to stay with that as that is happening. I've proven that here in Texas, contact information is flawed. Yeah, so there's problems. So this is dealing with large projects, and this is something I want to talk to you guys about. And it wasn't really on here, but we're looking to understand this better. Pennsylvania, Georgia, some of the states that have a large or complex project component built into their law and their process. Is that effective? Are there ways to make it more effective? Does that help to actually reduce the strain on the day-to-day 811 process for the homeowner who's stuck out there to dry kind of while all this intensity is happening around them? Or is it just another process or another task that has to be heaped on top of the 811 process? What are your thoughts about that, guys? Complex projects as an initiated type.
So I think there's definitely a place for that. I mean, if you look at the current act that's in front of the federal government, that's one of the recommendations that they have, large projects or complex tickets. I think for that to be successful, there's going to have to be something in the law that requires this to be done. I think if it's done halfway and you don't have all people that are involved, even the current utility owners, the contractor, the person financially responsible for that project, the locators, the municipalities, they have to all be involved and it has to be shared. There's, I think we've seen some states that have done a good job of trying to address this. But, with everything, you're going to find issues around it. But again, it requires the documentation, the communication, and, we haven't talked a lot about it, but, sharing prints, show us what your plan is, where you're going to be, when you're going to be there. And I think, and Kelly, that they've kind of taken this step already, and it's even showing some of your competitors because they currently have facilities in that area as well that they know what's coming and how they can help you protect their facilities in the process.
And Chris, just to add to your point of communication, we've we've started to change our approach about a year ago on how we deploy these projects, even the large projects we were just talking about. And the one of the important pieces, we've talked about this a little bit over the last 10 minutes or so, is the first step is just communicating what you're doing and when and what the scope is. That's helpful for everybody to get prepared and ready for the project. Um, to Lewis's point, and Chris, some of the ideas you presented, there has to be a quick follow on that where there's a more frontline recurring touch point to say, this is where we're struggling with trying to get work done where locates haven't cleared. And this is where we want to focus our resources and be in lockstep, as the owner or the operator, the excavator, the locator, and bring some efficiency to that process. Because what we see is when locates are late, and like everything, that not everything's going to go smoothly, it's going to be late, and excavators are delayed, their natural reaction is to push more work through the system than they can possibly do, to hope that something comes out that they can work on, and just compounds the problem. So we've got to start to do things in a way that restores trust a little bit more in the process. Again, nobody's doing anything intentionally, to slow up progress, but sometimes, the reactions to what's not working just makes the problem worse instead of better. So the things like the pre-cons and even large projects where you're staying in contact with all the partners throughout that large piece of work, giving them updates about, here's the footage we have next month, here's what we're going to do next quarter, here's where we're stuck Tuesday, and it takes that kind of information sharing at that level to make this effective.
And for that, I mean, the basis for that, the foundation is trust, right? So when we talk about the psychology of excavators working to figure out ways to get around it, what they perceive to be inefficiencies or whatever it might be, and compounding it, a lot of this all goes back to that trust between the individual groups. It's one of the reasons I really stress this concept of, making sure you understand that there's not a us and them. It's all us. We're all in this. And if you can get to that point, chances are, if I trust you, I'm going to be more likely to show you my cards, show you where I'm going, because I'm not thinking you're going to do something nefarious with it necessarily. And I understand that we're trying to accomplish the same goal, which is the safety and that type of thing. There's a lot of great stuff happening in the chat. One of the questions was about whether 811 laws should be regulated and enforced by PHMSA. PHMSA has a set of guidelines that they use to determine adequacy in the 811 laws, specifically as they relate to enforcement. I think enforcement is a component of this that can't really be overlooked. There's a variety of flavors of it in the country. Some of it's more effective than others. Some of it's being fine-tuned as we speak. But there has to be some vehicle at the end of the day to also to be able to go to and say, look, I'm exasperated because this group is just not doing anything to to play along with the rest of us. They're just consistently doing this or doing that. But as far as PHMSA coming up with the laws, I think they're more or less highlighting key components of them. And checking to make sure that those things are there. Their oversight is really limited to gas as it is, but they obviously control some purse strings as it relates to utility commissions and gas regulatory types of function and monies and that kind of thing that can come out of it. But yeah, absolutely. I think everybody's more or less on the same topic. We're thinking about technologies. What can we do to share white line was mentioned, electronic white line. What can we do to refine the excavation points and then share images of that, snapshots of that with the excavator. There's enhanced positive response action that can take place, and some people are engaged with it where they're sending out information about the locate, for example, back to the excavator. And I think if you're asking excavators to maintain their marks, anything you can do to help supply them with support in that effort makes sense. But we've kind of, it's great because we're kind of moving around some different things, but we're really talking about the same thing. And so as we get to this section on communication, it's been hit more than once here. It's the core of every effort to prevent damages. The communication that, and I think it was mentioned with Sue, it really does start with design, and prep work to understand what you're going, where you're going, why you're going in there. Coordinated, consolidated efforts to put things into the ground can absolutely help to streamline things. But what other communications outside of the 811 process do you think are critical to successful project deliveries?
I'll start with that one. So I think, and one of the challenges we're running into, and I think everyone's running into is, you know, there is a workforce demand for everyone right now, and it is a challenge to find people to come to work. One of the things we talk about pre-con meetings, and you talked a little bit about Sue, but when you know you're going to be building out a network, why not go ahead at that point and notify the other utilities in the area as well as the locators and municipalities? Because, if you really, we hear a lot about we won't train excavators, we won't train locators. If you want to train locator, they're not really sitting on the bench. It takes a while to get a locator good at what they do, so you can have to your point, trust, and that what they've marked is actually accurate. So the timing before it happens to be able to do that, and then I mentioned earlier, we've had success with several partners who, you know, you have daily meet sheets and weekly follow up calls. We talk about where we're going to go, when we're going to be there, and then it's just a clear line of communication. It's outside of the 811. You've got a ticket, you've got a good ticket, but do you have paint on the ground and can you dig? I think those are some of the things that immediately popped into my head when you talked about communication outside of 811. But it's getting to know who your locator or locators are on this project, who the foreman is that's running the crew, so that there is a line of communication. So when something happens, you hit rock, you got to move to another area. It's important to make sure that you're communicating not just through the legal requirements at 811, but with all the stakeholders in that particular area.
Yeah, I think the density issue, like when we talk about, when you say it could be rock, or it could be you're coming up on an area where that side of the right of way, that side of the road is completely inundated, but the other side looks free. And again, that's one of those token communication items that the locators could provide when that dialogue is happening. What I've seen is if that dialogue breaks down, then both parties are just saying to the other one, just do what you're supposed to do. And then that's the end of that part of the conversation. Kelly, what are your thoughts about that issue as far as outside communications?
Yep. And in addition to what we've talked to, and again, we're learning as we go here too, is to appreciate that not every project, not every location is the same. As a matter of fact, I don't think any two projects, any two locations are the same. So, you need to have customized approaches if you're building in the central business district, if you're building suburbs, if you're building in a smaller town or rural area. The approach, the communications, the people you work with, you have to be able to fine tune those so that you're engaging the right people at the right time and getting them the right information. And as I say, this is definitely work in progress for us. We're still refining our approach. And again, our government affairs team does a terrific job of just reaching out in advance. We work with cities to decide where and when we're going to build far in advance. So it's not like we're showing up with a shovel saying, hey, we're here. But sometimes there's a gap. There's a silence between that first communication of this is what we'd like G5 to do. Great, we can do it. And then the conversation sort of stops because that's two different organizations within each of the teams. And then sometime down the road, suddenly, hey, there's a project here, and it gets started. So just filling that gap in between, you know, regulatory approval, concept, here's high level what we're going to do, and first shovel on the ground, being sure that, again, depending on the nature of the municipality you're working with and what their needs are, just being sure that that conversation handoff happens and that there is communication and updates all along until projects start, and then obviously through the physical work as well.
But that's a real interesting point because I when I think about that gap between a company knowing where they're going to go, what they're going to do, then going to seek the approval and permits and everything that they need from a municipality, and then that gap as they're waiting for all that to happen to go. That intermediate period is a great opportunity, and that's one of those opportunities that the one call centers can step in on as well. Again, we deploy our liaisons in North Carolina at 50 UCCs. We have complete contacts with, all the people who are going to be impacted. So we can keep up the steady diet of communication if we're aware of it, and with enough notice to be able to make it meaningful. There's a lot of one of the things I want to mention here that popped up, and is PHMSA requires trained locators. Does every industry require it? What's interesting about that question is I think a lot of our laws even address that there shall be training for locators. The challenge is defining what specifically that is, what that is, because you have multiple companies. They're all doing training. They're all doing varying degrees of it. They all have their own processes by which they're going to have people riding along and QCing everything before they're really going to let that person be. It's kind of what Chris was saying earlier about it's not like you just pick them off the street and hand them a device and say, here's some maps, go for it. So I think most people do address the fact that there needs to be training. You must have training, but they don't go so far as to define what the minimum standards might be for that. For example, and if I'm missing something there, Chris, let me know. But I haven't seen anything in the laws that specify minimum standards for that kind of training.
No, I haven't either. I think it's, there are some, NOLCA is a good organization. It's kind of set some guidelines on what the minimum certification looks like. And then, I think it's the responsibility of the locator who cares about their employee, who wants to retain their employee, to make sure they give them the tools necessary to do the job correctly. I think, locator, honestly, it's kind of, to me, it's kind of like the medical profession. There's always going to be sick people. There's always going to be buried utilities. It is an opportunity for a career. And if you treat them right, you train them right. And it's an opportunity, because I mean, if you're a locator, you know how to locate and you're good at locating, you will never, ever go without a job, because there's someone there that needs a locator.
And that's a challenge when we talk about workforce. Again, one calls experience it. I'm sure the excavating community experiences it as well. Getting people and I don't know if it's a culture, I don't know if it's a generational thing or what it is, but getting people to come in the door willing to work, understanding that, that they're planning to make some time out of this, that they're going to spend a few years doing this and not just come and go. Also that they're not necessarily just a gun for hire, because my experience looking at the one call or at the locate side of things from the outside is that, like you said, if you're a good trained gun, some other municipality may take you away out of that because they see that that's the case, and they'll pay you a few more dollars an hour, and you almost become like a high IT tech guy that's just selling their services to the highest bidder. So there's quite a lot of interesting stuff. There's a lot of side dialogue here going on as well about sharing of maps, and it's good because I want to talk about maps. I do think that the maps are a critical component to this, and it's not just the accuracy of an initial map, that's put together, but it's the continual 360 revisions of that map. We've heard some interesting discussions in some other forums and other places about companies that are now using AI, for example, to scrape the web and get publicly available information to create layers of infrastructure that can be then shared with people for a cost, obviously. But, you know, at least the survey design people that I've spoken to about are really excited, because currently when you try to get that information in advance, even through a process like the survey design process in North Carolina, the maps you're getting are limited in terms of their detail, let's say, or their accuracy. And the chances of you actually getting someone to locate that far in advance when you're not excavating yet is even more less likely. So the ability to share maps from that level, the timeliness of those maps being registered with us, and then the timeliness of those maps being in the hands of locators where they can use them, I think is the other communication piece, I guess you would say, that directly involves maps. And it's been identified by the CGA as a potential weak link and a contributor to some of this. So in y'all's opinion, when you think about maps and accurate maps and the sharing of those maps, how does that play in the idea of on-time delivery of services, you know, and damage-free deployment?
So Lewis, in the view of damage prevention, this is a big challenge. Again, I've had background with telcos and cable companies, MSOs and ISPs, and internally, this is one of the biggest challenges we face as well. Oftentimes, you know, the larger providers are made up of multiple smaller acquisitions. So they've bought up a number of smaller companies making the current larger company. And, you know, that collection of data, you know, isn't always complete and accurate. And it's hugely time consuming to go out and physically audit a plant to be sure that all that information that you got from your acquired company is complete and accurate and reliable. So I absolutely agree that sharing the maps we have is the first step. But again, the completeness and accuracy of that is always a challenge. And I say
So
that because
that's actually a good tee up, because as we talk about maps healing themselves, how do the locators, how can they play a part? They're out there every day with equipment and technology, you know, identifying to some degree of accuracy where the horizontal, footprint is of this. Is that technology going to help bring about a more Wolverine style or Deadpool healing of a wound when something's mixed, a more timely, quick bring about? Chris, you want to talk about anything with the technology as far as some of the things that we've heard and seen?
Yeah, but real quick, Kelly, did he cut you off? It looked like you were still in mid-sentence.
No, I was just going to agree with Lewis, and technology is the answer. And I love your idea of leveraging the locators, you know, as they find discrepancies. Right now, I'm sure companies like USIC find all kinds of issues that don't agree with as-built conditions versus the map, but they don't have an easy way of transmitting that back to the owner operator. So part of that is working with companies where that exchange of information can happen quickly and easily. The point I was going to make, though, is from a damage prevention and safety point of view, it's so important to daylight, because again, this pressure to go fast now and you know, get the job done when we're damaged, more often than not, you know, it comes back to, we had locates, there was an issue, and if we daylighted, you know, we wouldn't have this problem, but we didn't. So I guess my message is maps are great. They're only as good as the data that goes into them, which is not always perfect. So having that understanding that even if you have a map, you don't have all the answers, you've got directional answers is important.
Yeah, and agreed. I mean, I think anybody that's on here is a locator. They understand that most cases, sometimes best case scenario, that map is a guideline. It may tell you how many facilities are there, but it definitely doesn't tell you where it's at. I mean, we've all seen customers that have the facility listed on this street and it's 2 streets over. So it is a challenge for all locating. I think, as technology, progresses, and I know, there are companies out there that, in fact, one of our sister companies that does GIS mapping now, that's accurate. I think as technology advances, particularly with this RTK type locating, where you're taking GPS coordinates, you know, to when you're doing the locates, that helps on a couple of things. I think one, it can help us internally if it's located at one spot this time and located another spot next time. Now we got an immediate audit potentially, but that's information that I think utility companies can use to help validate their prints and their records. I mean, I think Kelly hit it nail on the head. A lot of utility companies out there now are comprised of many, many other smaller companies that may or may not have had records at all, and definitely probably not accurate. So mapping to me twofold. One, sharing a map of where you plan to go on new construction, and then capturing or making sure that you as a utility owner have the best possible records out there to be able to provide to the utility locators, so they can identify everything that's there. Maybe it's not exactly where it's at, but we know it's there, and it's something that can be found, because there's nothing worse than not having a record, and as a locator that's locating for the 811 process, they're not going to use GPR. They're not doing SUE level work. They're just trying to get paint on the ground for the excavator to be able to dig. I think the better the maps, the better it'll be for all of us. Agreed.
And as the moderator, I want to throw a couple of things to you guys. It's kind of interesting. And there was a whole town hall dedicated to the abandoned lines issue. What is the fix for abandoned utility lines? This has been something that's been kicked around it's still going to be kicked around for quite a while, in my opinion. But that presents yet another challenge, right, for the excavator and for the locator. When you get out there and it's not represented on any map, you're marking out what you know to be there, and there's something that's no longer on the records. So I don't think that's necessarily, at this point, we got about 8 minutes left. I don't think we need to get too deep into abandoned lines, but I would encourage folks to definitely look at some of the conversation that happened in the previous town hall as a recording, because I know Texas has done some work, particularly with the pipelines, and done some pilots in looking at abandoned lines and sending additional information to the excavators. Had some success with that. It gets a lot more challenging on the distribution level. And that's going to be an increasing problem. So we're
Hey,
down
Lewis,
to, yes, sir.
Whitney has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see anybody's hands up. Whitney, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of shift the conversation. I've noticed quite a few questions actually coming in about like insurance, liability insurance, things like that. So a couple questions that I was reading on through the chat a little bit earlier were, should states and one-call centers require certificate of liability insurance from companies performing excavations? And then the second one was, if excavators fail to follow 811 laws, should the state insurance commissions remove the ability for companies to rely on liability insurance for damages and pay for them out of their profits?
So my take on that is a couple of things. First of all, from a one call, refusing excavators access to the process, you're not going to see that happen probably. But I'd like to see more insurance involvement in general, and some feet to the fire held in that regard. I think there's been some movement in that. There was some at some point, and maybe that's localized to certain states or certain entities. But if you look at stakeholders in general and who's participating in this process and discussing, there's a limited amount of insurance, in my humble opinion, at the table. And I definitely think that if you're in the business of insuring somebody and looking at risk modeling for that, it certainly makes sense that you would want to engage some of this in that process. Thoughts, guys?
I'm not going to be expert on this because, I'm not hiring those contractors to do the excavation, but, I would assume that most of our partners, the utility companies, have a requirement for any of their contractors that they have performing the work. I think where the gray area may come in is when that contractor then maybe hires subs. But, I think, the insurance, liability insurance, I also think, the knowledge of that state. There's contractors jumping from state to state, wherever the money's at, wherever the builds are at. We talked about doing Pipes Plus in North Carolina. I think they should show that they understand the state law and understand the specifics because every state is different. But Kelly, I'm not sure if you want to, as a utility, you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, our approach is, obviously we do due diligence with all of the vendors we hire to be sure that they are properly bonded, insured, all the requirements. But as you said, Chris, a lot of this work gets subcontracted out afterwards, and there's only so far we can go, to ensure that all that trickles down. So I hadn't given that a lot of thought, but it's an interesting point. Be good to dig into that a little further.
It feels like it would be good. I mean, the excavating community would benefit from it. The good actors, in other words, if you're able to approach the insurance companies and show and present yourself to be a damage-free or low damage, and it feels like that should be something that could influence. And I hate to use the GS word, but at the one point, Gold Shovel, when they were initiated, they talked about a score that they would relate to an excavator, with the hopes that that could even impact what their insurance, what they might be paying for premiums. Not trying to go there, but I'm just trying to say that there are benefits to the good actors if there's penalties, or if they're restricting the herd of workers that are being covered by insurance to those that are less risk. I mean, it just makes a certain amount of sense. So, all right, we've got 4 minutes left. Whitney, is there anything that you spotted in there? Thanks for sharing, Levi, the Abandoned Lines Town Hall. I will ask if you would also share the link. I mentioned that we at NC 811 had put together a flyer in conjunction with for the purpose of new contractors or contractors and their subs that are coming in to do this fiber work, that spells out kind of those key asks. One of the challenges that we're faced with, even working with the state, is they made it clear to us that these individuals that are coming in, they're private entities. So there's a limit to what they can actually, I guess, press for, which is another reason why I believe the dialogue has to be such that you're stressing the positive benefits of acting appropriately, making sure everybody's trained, making sure everybody's at the table, communicating through these processes, working safely, etc. I think that the success stories are critical. But if you'll share that flyer that we have up on our website, it can give one call centers or folks an idea of how to make a succinct explanation of why it's important, and maybe the key issues that you want to strike with those individuals that are doing that excavation. And we've got exactly looks like 2 minutes left. Is there anybody that's got a burning question that they want to try? Thanks for doing that, Levi. Is there anybody on the group out there that has a burning question they want to raise a hand and speak in the last couple of minutes? I've tried to incorporate as much, and we've tried to engage on as much of this as possible. Whitney, I guess my other question would be, are you guys able to share all this chat information with the participants on the back end?
Yes, yep, we'll share the chat and then a recording of the town hall as well.
Awesome. Any hands flying up? Anybody out there that's wants to say anything to us or ask a question of us at this point? No, we have a minute left. If not, I'm gonna go ahead.
There's another one. It looks like Steve's got his hand up.
Okay. Unmute yourself, please. Steve? Going once. I did see, while we're waiting for that, I did see him mentioning they're working on this free map data sharing initiative with Minnesota 811. That'll be made free, and that's excellent. And I'll just say from a one call perspective, we're looking into having more conversations about this 4M technology, or what that looks like, where it's hosted, how frequently it's updated, what the limitations are of accuracy, because we'd obviously want to have a disclaimer before we shared any information from that. But I think that may be technologically where things are going. Guys, you have any last thoughts as it's 12:30 as we wrap?
I just like to say thank you. I think damage prevention is a shared responsibility, and I think communication is going to be key for all of this to be successful, and that we can protect the safety of our communities.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to be on the panel. It was a great discussion today, as always. I've learned as much as I do when we do these things. It's been terrific. And just to close off, please, keep the communication, the coordination going. Reach out to me if you have any questions, anything we can be doing or thinking about differently.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys as well as the moderator for your time, and thank ESA as well for hosting this event. It's important that these dialogues keep going. We just can't have enough communication, as been stated in the past. And so thanks to all you that participated as well, and greatly appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to thank all of our panelists, moderator, and everyone else for sharing your expertise and engaging with each other in the chat today. Please take a moment now to fill out a brief survey that we will post in the chat so we can continue to improve these discussions and address topics that are important to you. A blog post about the town hall will be posted on excavationsafetyalliance.com, where you can register for future town halls. The next town hall will be on June 13th, discussing the question, can a damage prevention professional certification program help reduce damages and improve safety? And for all of you interested in a wide variety of GPR topics, the GPR Congress will take place on May 21st from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central. This is a free virtual event, and it will include 6 different sessions. You can register today at gprcongress.com. Again, thank you all for joining, and we will see you next month.
Thank you.